Hello, everyone. My name is Kelsie Nesselrode, and I will be presenting my thesis on toxic masculinity in The Great Gatsby. Since The Great Gatsby made its debut in April 1925, it has gained in popularity to become one of the most influential books depicting the Roaring Twenties. By far Fitzgerald's most popular text, the novel placed him on the literary map. A massive amount of critical analysis and reviews has been written on Gatsby, and the novel is still a relevant popular text to critique in the 21st century. After a review of the breadth of Gatsby criticism, I focus my analysis on those dealing with the lens of feminist literary criticism. Unlike most feminist critique of the novel from the 20th century, however, I decided to concentrate on issues surrounding toxic masculinity. Although even the most common of definitions fails to encompass all that term might mean in the intersections and disciplines it finds itself, I use frames provided by Michael Kaufman, whose book Theorizing Masculinities draws on interdisciplinary theories of masculinity from fields such as sociology, ethnography, and inequality studies. Kaufman's work provides useful parameters for my discussion of toxic masculinity and the Great Gatsby. As background, I'll first point out the broad strokes of feminist criticism that most intersected with my project. I focus on the observations of Dr. Maureen Wiley, who points out that feminist criticism seeks to analyze and describe the ways in which literature portrays a narrative of domination by exploring the economic, social, political, and psychological forces embedded within literature. Patriarchy defines who holds primary power and who predominates in roles of political leadership, moral authority, social privilege, and control of property. In every domain where patriarchy reigns, woman is other, marginalized and defined by difference in norms and values. Gender fluidity helpfully problematizes some of these broad strokes. Feminist literary criticism is concerned with the ways in which literature and other cultural productions reinforce or undermine various forms of oppression. Theorist and public intellectual Bell Hooks points out that feminist critique, quote, offers a new ideological meeting ground for the sexes, a space for criticism, struggle, and transformation, end quote. Next is background. It might be helpful to provide a brief overview of toxic masculinity. The term was coined by psychologist Shepard Bliss in the 1980s. Bliss formed this concept out of his lived experience reacting to, quote, militarized authoritarian masculinity, end quote. In a 2020 interview, Bliss explains, quote, I use a medical term because I believe that like every sickness, toxic masculinity has an antidote, end quote. Toxic masculinity became popularized and used by numerous movements, but its definition is sometimes misunderstood. Toward my analysis, New York Times writer Maya Salem usefully defines toxic masculinity as, quote, what can come of teaching boys that they can't express emotion openly, that they have to be tough all the time, that anything other than that makes them feminine or weak, end quote. Common characteristics of toxic masculinity, such as aggression, competitiveness, fear of emasculation, and the commodification of women, are all prevalent throughout Gatsby. Though these traits were unfortunately more the norm of the 1920s, these behaviors still stand out to readers and critics in the 21st century. University of Notre Dame professors Katie and Michael Macaluso examine the character of Tom Buchanan through a feminist lens and conclude that, quote, connections between toxic masculinity and Tom Buchanan, the Great Gatsby's leading antagonist, are clear and direct. The Macalusos discuss how Tom's actions throughout the novel are motivated by his desire to control, subjugate, and prove his perceived superiority toward others. The minor character Nick Carraway, for example, explains how Tom's, quote, two shining, arrogant eyes had established dominance over his face and gave him the appearance of always leaning aggressively forward, end quote. Kendall Cattarley critiques the novel and confirms that women in Fitzgerald's novel are either commodities by which Tom can possess or embodiments of an ideal for Gatsby. These understandings of women in The Great Gatsby take the integrity away from both Daisy and Myrtle. A 2023 article explains that money has made Tom feel powerful, and his violent abuse of Myrtle, his lover and a working class man's wife, emphasizes the role he has adopted in what he feels is a dominantly patriarchal society. Scholars conclude that Tom, quote, embodies the agent of commodification and the oppressor, end quote. Jay Gatsby additionally objectifies women, specifically Daisy Buchanan. Daisy is commodified and idealized by Gatsby, and he eventually morphs and reduces her to a mere trophy to be won and taken away from Tom. Gatsby's possessiveness over Daisy shows how he cannot see her as an autonomous person, considering her a symbol of wealth rather than an equal partner in the relationship, and claiming that, quote, her voice is full of money, end quote. University of Cincinnati professor Leland Person Jr. argues that, quote, Gatsby scarcely apprehended or loved the real Daisy. She was always an enchanted object, end quote. Throughout the novel, Jay Gatsby is known for his glamorous and extravagant parties designed to win Daisy over with his material success. Gatsby essentially reduces Daisy to a spectator. Kaufman adds dimension to the idea of objectification in the text when he notes that, quote, men enjoy social power and many forms of privilege by virtue of being male, but the way we have set up that world of power causes immense pain, isolation, and alienation, not only for women, but also for men. For example, Nick feels insecure around Tom and explains that when he's around him, Tom seems to be carrying himself as if he's, quote, stronger and more of a man than Nick is. The Macalusos explain that The Great Gatsby can be troubling because the novel suggests the more aggressive, violent, and intimidating a man is, the more likely he is to succeed. Tom's toxic masculinity comes out whenever he feels threatened. He responds by belittling or intimidating others. Tom is especially a bully to George Wilson, Myrtle's husband. When Nick asks if Mr. Wilson minds that Tom is having an affair with Myrtle, he responds, quote, he's so dumb he doesn't know he's alive, end quote. Tom Buchanan being threatened by other men in the novel proves the Macaluso's premise that, quote, patriarchy exists as a system not simply of men's power over women, but also of hierarchies of power among different groups of men and between different masculinities, end quote. Nick Carraway exemplifies this sentiment when he says, for example, quote, Tom Buchanan compelled me from the room as though he were moving a checker to another square, end quote. When Tom's masculinity is threatened, he also turns to violence, such as when he breaks Myrtle's nose, quote, with his open hand, end quote. Tom strikes Myrtle because she did not obey him, and his casualness of hitting her shows that it's probably not the first time that he's used violence against Myrtle. When discussing violence in men, author Michael Kaufman, in his book Theorizing Masculinities, reminds us that, quote, the existence of men's pain cannot be an excuse for acts of violence or oppression at hands of men, end quote. As Bell Hooks states, it is important for readers to understand, quote, the crisis facing men is not the crisis of masculinity, it is the crisis of patriarchal masculinity. Until we make this distinction clear, men will continue to fear that any critique of patriarchy represents a threat, end quote. Through characters like Tom Buchanan and Jay Gatsby, readers witness the destructive consequences of toxic masculinity. By studying and dissecting these themes prevalent throughout Gatsby, we engage in a vital conversation about the complexities of gender, power, and identity that resonate with us today. Thank you for watching.